Maya Chen's fingers moved across the holographic fabric interface at 6 a.m., adjusting the molecular weave of an evening gown that shimmered like oil on water. The loft's smart windows had already shifted to let in the gray dawn light filtering through downtown's forest of glass towers. Around her, bolts of sustainable biosilk and recycled carbon fiber stood in careful disorder, the kind of mess that looked chaotic to outsiders but made perfect sense to her. Her wrist display pulsed with an incoming message. The Vogue style editor again, confirming the feature that would go live next week. Maya swiped it away without reading. She was in that rare state of flow where nothing existed except the garment taking shape in front of her and the precise dance of her hands through the holographic controls. This dress would tell a story, the way fabric could hold memory if you knew how to encode it properly. Her grandmother had taught her that, back when textile work still meant physical looms instead of molecular assemblers. Across the city, in a waterfront mansion where the windows automatically tinted against the rising sun, Victoria Chen stood in front of her smart mirror. It analyzed her skin, suggested optimal makeup palettes, and displayed her social metrics in a tasteful sidebar. 10,000 new followers overnight. The algorithm was pleased. Her husband Bradley sat at the breakfast table behind her, his augmented reality contacts painting stock tickers across his vision. He hadn't looked at her actual face in 3 days. Victoria scrolled through her feeds with practiced efficiency, monitoring her carefully curated image. Then she stopped. A boutique fashion account had posted one of Maya's pieces, some ethereal dress that looked handmade, almost primitive in its simplicity. The engagement numbers were climbing. Victoria's jaw tightened. She opened her contact list and called their mother. "It's time for the success celebration dinner," Victoria said, her voice carrying that particular brightness that meant she was planning something. "Let's remind Maya what real achievement looks like." Maya didn't see that midnight blue dress as armor when she put it on that evening, but Sophie, her pattern maker and the closest thing she had to family that actually chose her, certainly did. "You look like you walked out of that Vogue feature," Sophie said, sealing the last smart stitch on the dress's back panel. The fabric responded to Maya's body temperature, shifting its shimmer in a way that seemed almost alive. "They don't know about the feature yet." Maya studied herself in the mirror, noting how the dress moved. She'd embedded the pattern with code that only showed under certain light frequencies, a hidden message in the weave. Her grandmother's initials and dates, repeated in microscopic detail throughout the entire garment. "Maybe I should have worn something less like you just proved you're better than all of them combined." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Not a chance. Besides, the invitation said important family business. That means your grandmother's estate. Which means you need to look like someone who knows exactly what she's doing." Maya's ancient sedan, a relic that actually required manual steering, looked absurd next to the sleek autonomous vehicles gliding through the Riverside Country Club's entrance. The valet actually hesitated before taking her keys, his eyes flicking to the rust spot on the door panel. She caught the moment his mural implant pinged her social score: registered designer, modest following, no corporate backing, and watched his professional smile cool by several degrees. The private dining room made her grandmother's factory seem honest by comparison. Everything was expensive in that particular way that screamed rather than whispered. Crystal holographic chandeliers that shifted through colors based on the room's collective mood. A table that cost more than Maya's yearly income, set with smart plates that analyzed nutritional content and posted aesthetic photos automatically to each guest's feed. The walls displayed a live composite of everyone's best angles, a constantly updating montage of their most flattering moments. Her family was already there, already performing. Robert and Helen Chen, her parents, held court at the head of the table. They'd built their wealth the hard way, her father's tech patents, her mother's strategic investments, but somewhere in the climb they'd forgotten what the view looked like from the bottom. Now they measured everything in metrics and market value. Victoria and Bradley sat to their right, a matched set of success. Victoria's dress had been featured in 3 luxury magazines that morning. Maya had seen the automated posts. Her sister's smile had that particular gloss that came from perfect cosmetic gene therapy and absolute certainty in her own superiority. Cousin Jennifer air-kissed Maya without making actual contact, her lip implants too expensive to risk on family. Oh, you made your own dress again. How thrifty. I just had this Chanel piece printed in Milan, original pattern, licensed DNA code from the actual archive. She didn't wait for a response, already turning to Marcus. Marcus, the investment banker, gave Maya that pitying look he'd perfected over years of family dinners. Still in that apartment downtown? I heard they're gentrifying that whole sector. Property values are going to price out all the artist types soon. You might want to think about moving before your lease is up. Maya smiled and said nothing. She'd learned that silence was often the best response to people who needed to hear themselves talk. Instead, she noticed Great Aunt May in the corner, her grandmother's sister, 75 years old and sharp as broken glass. The old woman was watching Maya with an expression that might have been approval. Helen's voice cut through the ambient chatter. Victoria just made partner at her firm, youngest in the company's history. Maya, dear, why don't you tell everyone about your sewing? The word landed like she'd meant it to. Sewing. As if Maya was hemming clothes in a basement instead of pioneering molecular textile design. As if her work with sustainable biofibers wasn't being studied by researchers in 3 countries. As if the Vogue feature didn't exist. Before Maya could respond, before she had to swallow the sharp retort building in her throat, Victoria stood, champagne glass raised. Before we begin, I have a special guest joining us. A potential business partner who I'm hoping to impress with our family's success. The door opened. Everyone, this is Ethan Cross. Maya felt the shift in the room before she understood it. The way air pressure changes before a storm. Ethan Cross moved into the space like he owned it without needing to prove anything. Tall, yes, but that wasn't it. The charcoal suit that was clearly bespoke but underplayed its expense. The way he scanned the room with eyes that catalogued everything in seconds, family dynamics, power structures, who mattered and who was merely decorative. Then his eyes found Maya. The pause was maybe half a second. Maybe less. But Maya felt it like a physical touch, that moment of recognition, of calculation, of something shifting behind his professional mask. Their eyes locked and the room's ambient noise seemed to fade into static. Ethan is one of the most successful boutique real estate investors in the country, Victoria continued, her hand possessive on his arm. He specializes in historical property development, among other things. Ethan's voice was exactly what Maya would have expected, controlled, precise, with an undercurrent of something that might have been amusement. But he was still looking at her. Victoria had orchestrated the seating arrangements, naturally. Ethan sat directly across from Maya, close enough that she could see the exact shade of his eyes, gray with flecks of something darker, and far enough that every glance felt deliberate. The smart table was tracking their interactions, she knew, feeding data to the room's social algorithms. Let Victoria's carefully planned evening generate all the metrics it wanted. The dinner began with the performance Maya had seen 100 times. Her family's greatest hits. Bradley, tell Ethan about the Hamptons property, her father said, right on cue. Bradley straightened, his augmented contacts flashing as he pulled up visualizations. A hologram of their beach house materialized above his plate, 8 bedrooms, private beach access, smart systems that anticipated their every need. We just closed last month. Victoria deserves the best. We're expanding Marcus's medical real estate portfolio. Jennifer added, not to be outdone. Just acquired a surgical center in the new biotech district. Real estate is where the smart money is. Victoria leaned toward Ethan, her voice pitched to carry to the whole table. Not everyone in the family shares our business sense. Maya chose the creative path. She made air quotes. She makes little dresses and sells them at craft fairs. Ethan set down his wine glass with precision. Craft fairs? Maya met his eyes across the table. There was something there, a test, maybe. An invitation to defend herself or stay silent. She chose the middle path. Boutiques, primarily. And some online retail. It's adorable, really, Victoria laughed. She has an Etsy shop or something. The smart table registered the comments' engagement, laughter from Marcus and Jennifer, forced smiles from her parents, stony silence from Great Aunt May. Maya watched Ethan's expression not change, but something in his eyes absolutely did. He picked up his wine glass again, studying her over the rim with an intensity that made her skin feel warm. "Fashion is an interesting industry," he said finally. "Incredibly competitive. Hard to break into, exactly why most people shouldn't try," Marcus jumped in. "Stick with what's reliable. What's proven." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest, that mix of frustration and resignation that came from being invisible in a room full of people who shared her blood. But then she thought of her grandmother, of that first factory floor with its rows of immigrant women who'd been told they were worthless. Who'd proven everyone wrong by making something beautiful and lasting. "Grandmother didn't think that way," Maya said quietly, but with steel underneath. "She started with one sewing machine in a factory she couldn't afford. She built something that mattered." Her mother's smile went brittle. "That was different, dear. She was providing for a family during hard times. You have options. You could have gone to law school like Victoria. You could have done something substantial." Speaking of grandmother. Victoria reached into her designer bag, smart leather that recorded everything and synced to her personal cloud, and pulled out sleek folders. "That's actually why we're all here. I have some papers that need signatures." The folders went to Maya, Marcus, and Jennifer. The fourth grandchild. The inconvenient heirs to a legacy that Victoria clearly wanted to control. Maya opened hers, skimming the legalese while her heart rate kicked up. The smart fabric of her dress registered her stress response and adjusted its temperature slightly, a subtle comfort. "Grandmother left us that old factory building downtown," Victoria said, her tone reasonable, practical. "For 23 Morrison Street. It's been sitting empty for 2 years, costing us money in taxes and maintenance. The building is outdated, in a declining sector, and frankly worthless for anything except demolition. I drove by it last month," Marcus said. "Total eyesore." "Surprised it hasn't been condemned," Victoria nodded, the supportive sister helping everyone see reason. "Exactly. So I found a developer willing to take it off our hands. I'm offering to buy out everyone's shares, 50,000 credits each." "That's generous, considering the building's condition and location." Jennifer was already reaching for a stylist to sign. "Where do I authorize?" "I'll take 50,000 for a crumbling relic any day." Then Victoria turned to Maya, and her smile held all the accumulated years of being the perfect daughter, the successful one, the child who'd made all the right choices. 50,000 is probably more than you make in 2 years with your little hobby, right? You could finally afford a real apartment in a decent sector. Maybe buy a car that doesn't need manual steering. Get comprehensive health coverage." The table went silent. Even the smart surface seemed to dim slightly, as if the room's algorithms had detected the shift in emotional tenor. It was a moment of pure, calculated humiliation. Victoria had orchestrated this entire evening to break Maya in front of their family's potential business partner, to demonstrate the clear hierarchy of success and failure. Maya's hands were trembling slightly as she looked down at the papers. The number swam in front of her eyes. 50,000 credits. It was an insult wrapped in false generosity. Victoria knew exactly what she was doing. "It's a smart offer, Maya," her father said, his voice carrying that tone of disappointed patience he'd perfected over decades. "This is what business looks like. Sometimes you have to recognize when something has no value." Maya looked up and caught Ethan watching her. Not with pity, she couldn't have stood pity. He was watching her like she was a complex equation he was solving in real time. Like he was seeing something everyone else in the room had missed. The intensity of his focus made her breath catch. "I need some air," Maya said carefully, "before I make any decisions." Victoria's smile turned triumphant. "Of course. Take your time." She turned to Ethan, already moving to the next phase of her performance. "She's always been too emotional for business. Some people just aren't built for the corporate world." Maya stood, her chair scraping with more force than she'd intended. The smart table registered her elevated heart rate, her stress markers, and helpfully dimmed the lighting in her section. She ignored it, ignored the pitying looks from Jennifer and Marcus, ignored her mother's disappointed headshake. She walked toward the terrace doors with her spine straight and her grandmother's dress moving around her like water. The terrace overlooked the city, a forest of towers lit from within, transit pods flowing between buildings like blood through arteries, holographic advertisements painting the night sky in colors that nature never intended. Maya gripped the railing and tried to breathe through the tightness in her chest. Not because of the money. She'd expected Victoria to lowball them. But because after 29 years, some part of her had still hoped her family might see her as more than a failure. Behind her, the terrace door opened. She didn't turn. "I'll sign the papers, Victoria," she said, her voice flat. "Just give me a moment." "That would be a terrible mistake." Maya spun around. Ethan Cross stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow from inside. He moved onto the terrace with that same controlled confidence, hands in his pockets, and positioned himself beside her at the railing. Close but not touching. The city lights caught his profile, sharp angles, darker shadows. "You should be inside," Maya said. "Victoria is planning to impress you with dessert. Probably has a whole presentation prepared about her investment portfolio." "I've seen enough of Victoria's portfolio." He paused, and when he turned to face her, something in his expression had shifted. "I'd rather talk about yours." "My portfolio?" Maya almost laughed. "I don't have that dress you're wearing." "It's a Mayachin original, isn't it?" The air between them changed. Charged. Maya felt her breath catch for the second time that evening, but this was different. This was dangerous. "How do you know my work?" Ethan turned to face her fully, and when he smiled it was devastating in its complete sincerity. "Your sustainable collection was featured in Vogue's Designers to Watch 3 weeks ago. The article called you the future of ethical fashion. It included a detailed breakdown of your sourcing methods, your fair wage practices, and your innovative use of molecular biofibers." Maya stared at him. "You read Vogue?" "I have 3 younger sisters who are currently engaged in a bidding war over who gets to wear your pieces to upcoming events. They send me articles constantly." He stepped closer, and Maya was suddenly aware of his cologne, something expensive but understated, cedar and something darker. "Though I have to admit, seeing the designer in her own creation? Their photos don't do it justice." Maya forced herself to stay still, to not react to the way her skin felt warm. "You're Victoria's business partner. Does she know you're out here flirting with the family disappointment?" "I was going to say talking to me, but yes." Ethan's voice dropped lower, more intimate. "If I were flirting, Maya, you'd know it." The way he said her name sent electricity down her spine. She was acutely aware of how close he was standing, how the terrace lights caught his eyes, how the smart fabric of her dress was probably broadcasting her elevated heart rate to anyone with the right monitoring app. "You should go back inside," she managed. "I appreciate the compliment, but I'm sure Victoria wouldn't appreciate. I'm not Victoria's business partner." The statement hung in the air between them. "I'm the investor deciding whether to fund her real estate project." There's a significant difference. Maya's mind raced, recalculating everything. The building she wants to buy needs all signatures. Including yours. He moved fractionally closer, and Maya could see the exact pattern of gray in his eyes. "Tell me about 423 Morrison Street. It was my grandmother's textile factory." The words came automatically, muscle memory from years of explaining her family history to people who didn't care. She ran it for 40 years. Employed immigrant women, taught them skilled trades, paid them fairly when nobody else would. When she died, she left it to the 4 grandchildren equally. She put in her will that she wanted us to honor the work of women's hands. What do you think that means? Maya met his eyes. I think she wanted us to decide together what legacy meant. Not just sell it to whoever offered the most credits. Ethan's smile was subtle but real. What if I told you that building is worth far more than Victoria is offering? I'd ask why you're telling me instead of her. Because 3 weeks ago, a brilliant designer contacted my firm with a proposal. His voice was careful now, measured. She wanted to know if there was a way to turn her grandmother's factory into a creative complex, sustainable fashion studios, artisan workshops, a community space that honored the building's history while creating something new. Maya's heart was hammering now. She remembered sending that inquiry late at night, half convinced it would disappear into the void of corporate non-responses. "That was you?" The investor who responded, Ethan Cross Development Group. "I specialize in adaptive reuse of historic properties." He paused. "When Victoria contacted me about developing the Morrison Street property, I realized this was the same building. I needed to meet the family before making any decisions. You came here to investigate us. I came here to see who I'd be doing business with." Whether Victoria was someone who valued heritage or just saw dollar signs. He was very close now, close enough that Maya could see the exact texture of his suit fabric, the way his pulse beat at his throat. "And to meet the designer who wrote the most passionate proposal I've received in 10 years. Your vision for that building was extraordinary." Maya's voice came out barely above a whisper. "What did you find out, that your family is blind?" His hand came up, almost touching her face, but stopped just short. The air in that small gap felt electric. "That you're exactly who I thought you'd be from your proposal, thoughtful, principled, creative." He paused. "And that this dress is even more stunning up close. You encoded your grandmother's initials in the weave pattern, didn't you? It shows under certain light frequencies." Maya couldn't breathe. "You can see that? I have optical implants calibrated for architectural detail work. They pick up patterns most people miss." His hand was still there, not quite touching her face. "Like I said. Extraordinary." The moment stretched between them, taut as a wire. Maya's entire body was aware of him, the heat radiating from his skin, the way he was looking at her like she was the only person in the city, the dangerous territory they were both stepping into. "This is crazy," she managed. "You just met me. I've been reading your work for months. Your designs, your philosophy, your interviews. I've watched you build a business on your own terms while everyone told you it was impossible." His voice dropped even lower. "Meeting you in person just confirmed everything I already knew. Which is, that you're the person I want to partner with. In business." The slightest pause, loaded with meaning. "And possibly other areas, if you're interested." The air between them was so charged that Maya thought if either of them moved, something would ignite. She opened her mouth to respond, to say what, she didn't know, when the terrace door opened behind them. Victoria stood there, her expression tightening as she registered how close they were standing, the intimate space they'd created that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the dangerous current running between them. "There you are." Her voice was bright, brittle. "Ethan, we're serving dessert. I want you to hear about our development timeline." She turned to Maya, dismissive. "You can come back inside when you're ready to sign." Ethan didn't break eye contact with Maya. "Actually, Maya and I were discussing the Morrison Street property. I have some questions about the building's history before we proceed." Maya doesn't know anything about real estate development. She knows about her grandmother's legacy. His voice was professional now, but Maya could still feel the heat of that almost touch on her face. "That's more relevant than you might think." He offered Maya his arm. She looked at him, at Victoria's tightening expression. Then she made her choice and took his arm, feeling the solid warmth of him through the expensive fabric. They walked back inside together, and Maya felt the weight of every eye in the room tracking their movement, recording this shift in the evening's carefully planned dynamics. Back at the table, the family was finishing dessert, already half drunk on expensive wine and their own importance. When Maya and Ethan entered together, her hand still on his arm, there was a visible ripple of curiosity. The smart table's algorithms were probably having a field day with the sudden spike in group tension. "Everything all right?" her father asked, his tone suggesting he expected nothing but compliance. "Actually," Ethan said, still standing, commanding the room's attention without effort, "I have some questions about the Morrison Street property before Victoria and I proceed with any plans." Victoria's smile froze in place. "Of course. What would you like to know?" "I'd like to know if everyone at this table understands what they're signing away." Silence dropped like a hammer. Even the ambient music seemed to quiet, as if the room's AI had detected the shift. That old factory building, Ethan continued, his voice carrying the weight of someone who dealt in concrete facts, is in the Morrison Design District, which has seen property values increase 340% in the last 3 years. The building has historical designation status, which means substantial tax credits for preservation. It has 15,000 square feet of space with industrial bones, north-facing windows, and original architectural character that developers pay millions to recreate. Marcus leaned forward. How do you know all this? It's my job. I evaluate historic properties for development potential. Ethan turned to Victoria, and his expression was perfectly professional. Perfectly dangerous. What's the building currently appraised at, Victoria? Her smile stayed fixed. Appraisals vary depending on methodology. I had it appraised last week by 3 independent firms. Average valuation, 4.2 million credits. Divided equally among 4 heirs. That's 1,050,000 credits per share. The table erupted. Helen's hand flew to her mouth. Jennifer made a choking sound. Marcus's augmented contacts flashed as he pulled up his own real estate calculations. Even Bradley looked up from his news feed. Did you say million? Helen's voice was faint. Each. Wait, Jennifer turned on Victoria, her professional real estate agent brain finally engaging. You said it was worthless. My share is worth over 1 million credits? Marcus was staring at his sister like he'd never seen her before. Maya stayed quiet, but she met Victoria's eyes across the table. Watched her perfect sister's perfect facade start to crack. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Steady. Which makes 50,000 credits about 5% of what you just tried to buy our inheritance for, Victoria. Every eye in the room turned to Victoria. Her face had gone from confident to cornered, from the golden child to the family con artist, all in the space of 30 seconds. Bradley set down his fork with deliberate care. Victoria, what is he talking about? You said the building was falling apart. You said we were doing Maya a favor. It needs massive renovations. Victoria's voice pitched higher. That appraisal doesn't account for, actually, Ethan said, and Maya heard the steel underneath his professional courtesy. The Historical Society is offering renovation grants up to 500,000 credits for preservation projects. The building is structurally sound. I reviewed the inspection reports yesterday. With minimal investment, it's worth significantly more as a functioning space than as a teardown. Robert Chin looked at his younger daughter, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. Maya. How did you know to ask these questions? This was it. The moment where everything changed or stayed the same. Maya stood, her grandmother's dress catching the light, the encoded message in its weave visible to anyone who knew how to look. Every eye in the room was on her. She was no longer the punchline. She was the one holding all the cards, and she was just getting started. Maya stood in the center of the Riverside Country Club's private dining room. The weight of 12 pairs of eyes pressing against her like physical force. The smart table's surface pulsed with a faint blue glow, processing the collective biometric spike in the room, heart rates elevated, stress hormones flooding systems, the algorithms probably flagging this moment as peak dramatic engagement for whoever was recording. She looked at her father first. Robert Chen's augmented contacts were flashing rapidly, pulling up data she couldn't see but could guess, property values, investment portfolios, maybe even her own social metrics displayed in cold numerical judgment. His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he had no prepared speech about market trends and smart decisions. Because 3 weeks ago, Maya said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, a commercial real estate investor named Ethan Cross responded to my business proposal. Victoria's face went white. Actually white, the expensive gene therapy failing to maintain the perfect complexion it promised. Maya turned to look at her sister, really look at her. I wanted to turn grandmother's factory into a creative complex. Sustainable fashion studios, artisan workshops, a community space that honors what she built. When I heard you were trying to buy everyone out, I asked Ethan if he'd be willing to meet the family first. She paused, letting the words land. To see who you really were. The silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Even the ambient music had stopped, the room's AI apparently deciding this moment required no soundtrack. Maya could hear the faint hum of the holographic chandeliers. The whisper of climate control, the sharp intake of Jennifer's breath, you. Victoria stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You set this up? This whole dinner? No. Maya's voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it cut deeper. You did that. You planned this evening. You invited everyone. You brought Ethan here to witness your family's success and my failure. She felt something shift in her chest, something that had been clenched tight for years finally loosening. I just decided to stop accepting your version of my worth. Ethan stood as well, his movement smooth and controlled. When he spoke, his voice carried that same professional courtesy, but underneath it ran a current of steel. I came tonight to evaluate a potential investment. In my experience, character matters as much as capital in successful partnerships. I wanted to see if I was investing in someone who builds communities or someone who exploits family. Bradley's chair scraped as he turned to his wife. His augmented contacts were flashing rapidly, probably pulling up the real property data he should have verified months ago. Victoria, what is he talking about? You said that building was a liability. You said we were doing Maya a favor taking it off her hands. I was trying to help the family. Victoria's voice pitched higher, that perfect control finally cracking. Help yourself to our inheritance. You mean? Marcus was on his feet now too, his investment banker brain clearly running calculations. I'm not signing anything. Jesus, Victoria, I almost gave away 1,000,000 credits because you said it was worthless. Jennifer's hand had gone to her throat, her real estate agent instincts warring with her shock. Neither am I signing. Oh my God. I just told my husband we had an extra 50,000 coming. He's going to. She stopped, staring at Victoria with something between horror and grudging respect. You almost pulled it off. Helen Chen's carefully maintained composure had shattered. She was staring at Maya like her younger daughter had just materialized out of quantum foam. You're doing a real business deal? With an actual investor? The question would have hurt more if Maya hadn't been expecting it. She'd spent 29 years being underestimated by these people. One more moment of their disbelief was just data confirming what she already knew. Mom, I've been running a real business for 5 years. Maya's voice softened but didn't waver. My collection just got picked up by Nordstrom for nationwide distribution. Next month, I'm showing at New York Fashion Week. The Vogue feature goes live in 3 days. She watched her mother's face cycle through confusion, shock, and something that might have been the beginning of comprehension. I chose to live modestly because I was investing everything back into my company and saving for something that mattered. I thought you knew that creativity and commerce weren't opposites. Great Aunt May rose from her chair with the kind of dignity that came from surviving wars and building empires with nothing but will and work. When she spoke, her voice carried across the room with surprising strength. Your grandmother knew. She left that building to you because she wanted to see who would honor her values. Maya is the only one who asked what Maylin would have wanted. The words hit Robert Chin like a physical blow. Maya watched her father's face, really watched it, as understanding dawned in his augmented eyes. Maya, we didn't know. You never said, I tried. The words came out more bitter than Maya intended. Every time I mentioned my work, someone changed the subject or made a joke. After a while, I stopped trying to prove myself to people who didn't want to see me. The weight of that statement settled over the table like fallout. Helen looked away, shame coloring her perfect features. Robert shifted in his chair, his expensive suit suddenly seeming like costume rather than armor. Even Marcus and Jennifer had the decency to look uncomfortable. Ethan's voice cut through the tension with professional precision. Which brings us to the business at hand. Victoria, I appreciate your reaching out to my firm, but I don't think we're a good fit for partnership. Because of her? Victoria's voice had gone shrill. Because Maya, because your proposal was to demolish a historic building for luxury condos that don't serve the community. Ethan's tone remained neutral, factual, devastating. Maya's proposal is to create something that honors the building's history while providing space for artists, small businesses, and craftspeople, the same people your grandmother employed. That's the kind of project I invest in. Victoria's perfect mask was fragmenting in real time. I'll change the plans. We can incorporate some of Maya's ideas. I don't think so, Victoria. Maya felt something settle in her chest, something that might have been peace or might have been the simple relief of finally speaking truth. I've spent my whole life trying to squeeze into your definition of success. I'm done, you self-righteous. Victoria's voice went venomous, all pretense of sisterly concern evaporating. You think you're better than me now? You live in a shoebox. You drive a car that's falling apart. You shop at thrift stores. I live within my means. Maya's voice stayed level. I drive a car that runs. And I shop where I find inspiration. She paused, meeting her sister's eyes. The difference between us, Victoria, is that I know the difference between wealth and worth. You have things. I have purpose. The words hung in the air like a challenge, like a benediction, like the final move in a chess game that had been playing out for decades. Ethan was watching Maya with barely concealed admiration. Maya, if you're willing, I'd like to discuss a formal partnership. My firm would provide capital and development expertise. You'd provide creative vision and community connection. We'd convert your shares of the Morrison Street property into equity in a real development, one that honors what your grandmother built. What about our shares? Marcus had recovered his investment banker composure. Jennifer and I still own 50% between us. I'm offering to buy your shares for fair market value, 1,050,000 credits each, if you're interested. Or you could join as limited partners in the development. Your choice. Jennifer didn't hesitate. I'll take the money. No offense, Maya, but I have 3 kids and a mortgage on a house that's bigger than I can actually afford. I'll take the clean exit. Same. Marcus nodded. I'm not in the fashion business. But Maya, he paused, looking at his younger cousin with something that might have been respect. I'm sorry. For all of it, and Victoria's share? Ethan's question turned every head toward the golden child, the perfect daughter, the one who had orchestrated this entire evening to humiliate Maya in front of their family's potential business partner. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. Bradley was staring at her with a mixture of anger and disappointment that suggested their drive home would be unpleasant. The room's algorithms were probably having a field day with the biometric chaos. You can have it. Victoria's voice was barely controlled. All of you. I don't want any part of this. She grabbed her designer bag, the one that recorded everything and synced to her personal cloud, and stood. For a moment, she and Maya locked eyes across the table. There was something raw in Victoria's expression, something beneath the fury that might have been hurt or might have been the realization that she'd miscalculated catastrophically. Then she was gone, her heels clicking against the smart floor as she stalked toward the exit. Bradley hesitated, looked at the assembled family, then threw an apologetic look at the table before following his wife. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss. The room's atmospheric controls adjusted, reading the shift in collective mood and brightening the lights slightly, easing the temperature down. Maya realized she was still standing, still holding herself rigid like she was bracing for another attack. Robert was the first to speak. Maya. I owe you an apology. We all do. Helen's eyes were wet with tears that her gene therapy couldn't prevent. We've been terrible to you. I don't know why I couldn't see. Her voice broke. Your grandmother tried to tell me you were special. She said you had her vision. I don't need you to see me as special. Maya felt her own control starting to crack. Felt the weight of years pressing against the dam she'd built. I just needed you to see me as enough. Great Aunt May crossed to Maya with surprising speed for her age. She took Maya's face in her hands, hands that had worked looms and raised children and buried a sister, and kissed her forehead. Maylin would be so proud. Not just of your success, but of your character. You didn't become cruel when they were cruel. You just became strong, that did it. Maya felt tears well in her eyes for the first time all evening. Not tears of humiliation or anger, but something cleaner. Something that felt like grief and relief mixed together. Jennifer had pulled out her phone, was scrolling rapidly. Maya, I've been following your Instagram for months. Chen Heritage Designs, that's you? I just didn't connect. She looked up, genuinely chagrined. Your designs are incredible. My daughter wants 3 pieces for her graduation. I feel like an asshole. Marcus was looking at his expensive watch like it might tell him how to fix the past. Maya managed a laugh despite the tears. You've been one for years. At least now you're self-aware, despite everything, despite the tension and the revelations and the bomb that had just detonated in the middle of their carefully constructed family mythology. People laughed. The sound was startled, genuine, almost therapeutic. Ethan stood, his movement drawing every eye. When he offered his hand to Maya, the gesture felt loaded with meaning that had nothing to do with business contracts. Ms. Chen, shall we continue this conversation somewhere more conducive to creative planning? Maya looked at his hand, at him, at the room full of her family watching this moment with expressions ranging from shock to respect to her mother's tentative hope. Then she made her choice and took his hand, feeling the solid warmth of his palm against hers. Lead the way, Mr. Cross. As they walked toward the exit together, Maya heard her mother's voice behind them. Will you come for dinner? Real dinner, not this. Just family. I want to hear about your work. Maya paused at the door, looked back. Her mother's face was open in a way she hadn't seen in years. I'll think about it. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was possibility, which was more than she'd had. Walking in, Ethan's car was waiting in the country club's automated garage, a sleek Tesla that probably cost more than her yearly income but didn't advertise it. As he opened her door, his hand brushed her lower back, just a moment of contact that sent electricity racing down her spine. The smart fabric of her dress registered the touch, probably recorded her spike in heart rate. Where are we going? Maya asked as he slid into the driver's seat beside her. Somewhere I think you need to see. He pulled out into traffic, the car's autonomous systems handling navigation while he glanced over at her. The city lights painted his profile in shifting colors, green from transit signs, red from brake lights, the blue glow of his dashboard. They drove in silence for several minutes. Not awkward silence, but the kind of quiet that felt full rather than empty. Maya watched the city slide past, towers of glass and steel, holographic advertisements painting the night sky, transit pods flowing between buildings like blood through arteries. This was the world her family worshipped. The metrics and markets and carefully curated success. At a red light, Ethan turned to look at her fully. You were magnificent back there. I was terrified, you didn't show it. His voice dropped lower. When you stood up to Victoria, when you explained your values, he paused, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. I've never wanted to kiss someone in the middle of a business meeting more in my entire life. Maya's breath caught. The car's interior suddenly felt smaller, warmer. We're not in a business meeting now, no. His eyes were dark, intent. We're not. The light changed. He accelerated, the car responding instantly. Maya felt her heart rate kick up, felt the smart fabric of her dress adjust to her rising temperature. The tension in the car was thick enough to touch. They pulled up in front of 423 Morrison Street. Maya's breath caught. She hadn't been here since her grandmother's funeral 2 years ago, hadn't been able to face the empty building that represented everything she'd lost. But now, in the moonlight, it was beautiful. Historic brick that had weathered decades, tall windows that caught the city lights, industrial bones mixed with elegant architectural details that spoke to a time when buildings were made to last. I have keys from the estate lawyer. Ethan's voice was careful. Want to see what we're fighting for? Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. Inside, the space took her breath away. Exposed wooden beams crossed the ceiling like ribs. The original floors had been worn smooth by decades of women's footsteps, immigrant women, working women, women who'd made something from nothing. The north-facing windows her grandmother had insisted on installing LED and moonlight that painted everything in silver and shadow. It's perfect. Maya spun slowly, taking it in. It's exactly what I imagined. I've been in this building 3 times in the past month. Ethan moved closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. Every time, I pictured you here. Your designs on the walls. Your studio in that corner. Community workshops in this space. Maya turned to face him. You pictured me here before you met me? Your proposal included photographs of your work. Your headshot from your website. He was very close now, close enough that she could see the exact pattern of gray in his eyes. I may have spent more time than was professionally appropriate looking at them. That's borderline stalking, Mr. Cross. That's thorough due diligence, Ms. Chen. They were standing in the center of the empty factory floor, circling each other like they were dancing to music only they could hear. The moonlight caught the encoded pattern in Maya's dress, her grandmother's initials glowing faintly in the specific light frequency. We should talk about the partnership. Maya's voice came out breathier than she intended. Terms. Timeline. Investment structure. We absolutely should. We should be professional, completely professional. Neither of them moved away. The tension was unbearable, delicious, dangerous. Why do I feel like we're not going to be professional? Maya's voice had dropped to barely above a whisper, because I've been thinking about kissing you since you walked onto that terrace. Ethan's voice was rough. Because watching you take control of that room was the most attractive thing I've ever seen. Because you're brilliant and talented and you don't even realize how extraordinary you are. Ethan, tell me to stop. His hand came up, not quite touching her face. Tell me this is just business. And I'll step back. We'll have a proper meeting in my office with lawyers and contracts and nothing but professional respect. Maya's heart was hammering. The smart fabric of her dress was probably broadcasting her physiological chaos to any nearby sensors. And if I don't want you to stop, that was all it took. Ethan closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hand cupping her face. He paused for just a heartbeat, one moment where she could have pulled away, could have chosen differently, and then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was fire and hunger and weeks of email exchanges and the thrill of finding someone who actually saw you. Maya's hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer. His arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly as she gasped against his mouth. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Maya was leaning against one of the factory's support columns. Ethan's hands were braced on either side of her head, their bodies not quite touching but close enough to feel the heat radiating between them. That was unprofessional, he said, completely inappropriate. We should establish some boundaries, definitely. His forehead rested against hers, and Maya could feel his smile. Tomorrow. We'll be professional tomorrow, and tonight, I'm just a man who's completely captivated by an extraordinary woman. No business. No family. Just us. He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough. His hand slid into her hair, careful not to disturb the styling, but possessive nonetheless. Maya melted into him, all the stress and tension of the evening transforming into pure want and connection and the terrifying exhilaration of choosing something just for herself. When they finally pulled apart again, Maya's dress was registering dangerously elevated vitals. She laughed breathlessly. We're going to be business partners. Yes, this could complicate things. It absolutely will. We should be smart about this. Ethan leaned down to kiss her neck, just below her ear, and Maya's ability to form coherent thoughts scattered. I'm not feeling particularly smart right now, Ethan. Her voice broke. If we do this, if we mix business and whatever this is. He pulled back to look at her seriously. Then we do it honestly. No games. No power dynamics. Equal partners in business, equals in everything else. He paused, searching her face. But Maya, I need you to know, I wanted you as a partner before tonight. Your vision, your values, your designs. The attraction is something else. Something I didn't expect. If you want to keep this purely professional, I'll respect that. The business deal stands either way. Maya studied his face, the honesty there, the vulnerability that matched her own. And if I don't want to keep it purely professional, then I'm going to kiss you again. And then I'm going to take you to dinner, a real dinner, and learn everything about you that's not in a business proposal. And then I'm going to court you properly, if that's not too old-fashioned. His smile was devastating. Because you're not someone for a casual fling, Maya Chen. You're someone worth doing this right. Maya felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Give me time. I'm just getting started. He kissed her again, and this time it felt like a promise, not just of tonight, but of something building, something real and complicated and worth the risk. 6 months later, Maya stood in what used to be her grandmother's factory and was now the Morrison Street Creative Complex. The transformation was complete. Exposed brick walls now displayed rotating art installations. The original wood floors had been restored to gleaming perfection, and the north-facing windows let in light that made the whole space feel alive. Her flagship studio occupied the ground floor corner, floor-to-ceiling glass walls showcasing the molecular fabric assemblers and traditional sewing stations working in harmony. The grand opening gala was in 3 hours. Maya's dress hung on a mannequin nearby, a piece she'd designed specifically for tonight, encoded with more than just her grandmother's initials this time. The entire garment was a narrative in bio-silk, telling the story of women's labor across generations. Under the right light frequency, it would reveal phrases in a dozen languages: dignity, labor, legacy, worth. Her wrist display pulsed with incoming messages. The Vogue feature had gone nuclear, picked up by fashion feeds worldwide. Nordstrom wanted to double their order. 3 venture capital firms had reached out about expansion funding. And her social metrics had climbed to numbers that would have made Victoria's carefully curated presence look quaint by comparison. Maya swiped them all away. The numbers didn't matter, or rather, they mattered less than what they represented. Proof that you could build something meaningful and successful without compromising your values. You're doing that thing again. Ethan's voice came from behind her, warm with amusement. Maya turned to find him leaning against the doorframe of what would soon be the community workshop space. 6 months, and she still felt that same spark when she saw him, the way his presence seemed to fill a room without demanding it, the careful attention in his eyes, the suit that whispered money but somehow made him look more accessible rather than less. What thing? That thing where you stare at your creation and look terrified. He crossed to her, his hand finding the small of her back in a gesture that had become familiar, necessary. The building is perfect. Your studio is perfect. The dress is perfect. Stop catastrophizing. I'm not catastrophizing. I'm preparing for variables. Maya leaned into him slightly, allowing herself the comfort. 6 months of partnership, business and otherwise, and she was still learning how to accept support without seeing it as weakness. My entire family is coming tonight. Including Victoria. Ethan's hand stilled on her back. She RSVP'd this morning. With Bradley. Maya pulled up the message on her wrist display. The text was professionally cordial, nothing more. I don't know if it's an olive branch or a reconnaissance mission. Does it matter? Maya considered that. 6 months ago, the answer would have been yes. 6 months ago, she'd still been measuring herself against Victoria's metrics, still trying to prove she was enough. Now, standing in her grandmother's factory transformed into something that honored the past while building the future, she found the answer had shifted. No, she said finally. I guess it doesn't. Ethan's smile was approving. He leaned down to kiss her temple, a casual intimacy that still made her heart do complicated things. Good. Because you have nothing to prove to anyone. Least of all her. Maya's phone chimed with a different tone, the one she'd assigned to Sophie. The caterers are here. And apparently Great Aunt May arrived an hour early and is already rearranging the furniture. Of course she is. Ethan laughed. I'll handle it. You finish getting ready. He kissed her properly this time. A slow, thorough thing that made Maya momentarily forget about caterers and families and grand openings. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark. For luck, that was for luck. That was because you look beautiful when you're nervous, and I'm not allowed to do what I actually want to do because you'll mess up your hair. His smile turned wicked. But later, after all your family has gone home and it's just us and this space you built, then we'll discuss partnership expansion opportunities? Maya's tone was prim, but she couldn't stop her own smile. something like that. He left to deal with Great Aunt May, and Maya turned back to the dress. She'd designed dozens of pieces in the past 6 months. But this one felt different. This one was armor and announcement, vulnerability and strength stitched into every seam. By the time guests started arriving, the Morrison Street creative complex glowed like a lantern in the downtown design district. Strategic lighting made the historic bricks seem to pulse with warmth. Inside, the space hummed with carefully controlled energy, servers in sustainable uniforms that Maya had designed specifically for tonight, a quartet playing string arrangements on the mezzanine, the smell of expensive food that actually tasted like something rather than just photographing well. Maya stood near the entrance in her narrative dress, feeling the weight of encoded text shift against her skin as she moved. Ethan was beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers in silent support. Sophie was working the crowd with her pattern maker's eye, pointing out design details to anyone who would listen. Great Aunt May held court near the community workshop space, telling stories about working in the original factory to a rapt audience of young designers. Then her parents arrived. Robert and Helen Chin stepped through the entrance and stopped, their augmented eyes scanning the space with visible shock. Maya watched her father's contacts flash rapidly, pulling up data, calculating value, trying to quantify what he was seeing. Her mother's hand had gone to her throat, a gesture Maya recognized from childhood as genuine emotion. Maya. Her father's voice was softer than she'd heard it in years. This is extraordinary, her mother finished. She crossed to Maya, her expensive heels clicking on the restored floors, and took both of Maya's hands. Your grandmother would be so proud. The words hit harder than Maya expected. She'd spent months imagining this moment, preparing for skepticism or faint praise or another round of comparisons to Victoria's achievements. She hadn't prepared for sincerity. Thank you, Maya managed. Her mother squeezed her hands. I've been reading everything about your work. The Vogue piece. The sustainability awards. The partnerships with immigrant artisan cooperatives. Her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. I understand now what you were trying to tell us. I'm sorry it took me so long to listen. Robert cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with emotional displays. The business model is sound. Ethan sent me the projections. You've built something sustainable in every sense of the word. It wasn't an apology, but from her father, it was close enough. Maya felt something in her chest knot slightly. Marcus and Jennifer arrived shortly after, Marcus's wife in tow. He'd brought his 3 kids, who immediately gravitated to the interactive design displays Maya had set up specifically for younger visitors. Jennifer spent 20 minutes examining the fabric samples in the community workshop space, asking technical questions about molecular weaving that proved she'd actually done research. My daughter still wants those 3 pieces for graduation, Jennifer said, approaching Maya with something like humility. And I'd like to commission something for myself. For the medical building's opening. Something that tells a story. Maya felt her throat tighten. I'd like that. The evening flowed around them, designers and investors, community leaders and fashion journalists, all moving through the space that Maya had imagined and Ethan had helped make real. She watched people pause in front of the restored factory floor, reading the plaques that told the stories of the women who'd worked there. She saw young designers examining her studio setup, their faces bright with possibility. Then Victoria walked in. Maya felt the shift in the room before she saw her sister. That particular quality of attention that Victoria commanded, the way people's eyes tracked her movement. She was wearing designer everything, a dress that probably cost more than Maya's rent used to. Jewelry that caught the light with deliberate calculation. Bradley followed a step behind, his expression carefully neutral. Victoria's eyes found Maya across the room. For a moment, they just looked at each other, 2 sisters who'd spent a lifetime in competition, who'd been raised to measure their worth in metrics and market value, who'd finally chosen different definitions of success. Then Victoria crossed the room. Maya. Her voice was controlled, professional. Congratulations. This is impressive, thank you for coming. Maya kept her own tone neutral, waiting to see what this was. Victoria glanced around the space, her augmented contacts undoubtedly pulling up valuations and foot traffic data. I read the Vogue piece. And the New York Times profile. And the business analysis in Forbes. She paused, something flickering in her expression. You were right. About the building. About grandmother's legacy. She stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. About worth versus wealth, Maya waited. This was Victoria's show, my marriage is ending. Victoria said it quietly, without drama. Bradley and I signed separation papers last week. Turns out building a relationship on asset accumulation isn't as sustainable as building one on actual values. She looked at Ethan, then back to Maya. You chose better. It wasn't an apology exactly. But from Victoria, it was acknowledgement. Recognition. The closest thing to surrender that her sister was capable of. I'm sorry about your marriage, Maya said, and meant it, don't be. I'm not. Victoria's smile was brittle but real. I'm actually relieved. Turns out perfect is exhausting when you're faking it. She glanced around the room again. This place, what you built, it's real. That's worth more than I gave it credit for. Before Maya could respond, Great Aunt May appeared at her elbow. The old woman looked at Victoria with sharp eyes, then nodded once. Your grandmother left you for that building to teach you something. Maya learned it. Perhaps you're learning it now. Victoria's professional mask cracked slightly. I miss her. I didn't realize how much until I saw what Maya did with this place. She's here, May said simply. In every restored beam and every workshop space. In the story your sister is telling with fabric and light. She touched Victoria's arm briefly. It's not too late to honor that. The moment stretched between them, 3 generations of Chen women standing in a factory that had witnessed decades of female labor and strength. Then Victoria nodded, something settling in her expression. I'd like to fund a scholarship, she said to Maya. Through the community workshop program. For young designers from immigrant families. If you'll let me, Maya studied her sister, really studied her. The perfect facade was still there, but underneath it she could see something raw, something almost honest. I'd like that, Victoria nodded once, that familiar gesture of decision made. Good. Have your people contact my people. A pause, and her mouth quirked. That sounded exactly as pretentious as it was supposed to. Despite everything, Maya laughed. Beside her, Ethan's hand found hers, his fingers lacing through hers in silent support. The evening continued. Speeches were made, Ethan talking about adaptive reuse and community investment, Maya speaking about her grandmother's vision and the importance of ethical fashion, Great Aunt May telling stories that made people laugh and cry in equal measure. The press coverage would be extensive, Maya knew. The metrics would climb. The social algorithms would classify this as peak aspirational content, but in the moment, what Maya felt most was her grandmother's presence. In the restored floors beneath her feet. In the light streaming through windows that had witnessed so many women's labor. In the community that was already forming around this space, artists and craftspeople and people who believed that work could be both profitable and meaningful. As the crowd began to thin, Ethan pulled Maya aside to the mezzanine level. From here, they could see the entire factory floor, the mingling guests, the glowing displays, the physical manifestation of everything they'd built together. Tired? He asked, exhausted. Maya leaned against the railing, feeling the dress shift around her. Also exhilarated. Also terrified. Also, she paused. Also really grateful you answered my email 6 months ago. Ethan moved behind her, his arms circling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. Best business decision I ever made. Just business? Well. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. The business partnership is profitable. The other partnership is, he paused, seemed to choose his words carefully. The other partnership is the best decision I've made, period. Maya turned in his arms to face him. 6 months, and she was still learning the geography of his face, the exact shade of gray in his eyes. The way he smiled when he thought she wasn't looking, the careful way he touched her like she was something precious. I love you, she said. Simple. Direct. True, Ethan's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through the professional mask he wore so well. I've been waiting for you to say that, I know. You said it 3 weeks ago and I panicked. You did panic. Impressively. His smile was soft. But I figured you'd get there eventually. You just needed to trust it. I trust you. Maya surprised herself with how true it was. 6 months ago, trust had been a foreign concept, something for people who hadn't spent their whole lives being underestimated. Now, standing in her grandmother's factory with Ethan's arms around her, trust felt like the most natural thing in the world. He kissed her then, slow and thorough, the kind of kiss that promised later and always and everything in between. When they broke apart, Maya was breathless and her carefully styled hair was definitely messed up and she absolutely didn't care. Your family is watching, Ethan murmured against her mouth, let them watch. Maya kissed him again. I'm done performing for anyone's expectations but my own. Below them, the party continued. Maya could see her parents talking with a group of investors, her mother gesturing animatedly. Marcus was taking photos of his kids in front of the design displays. Jennifer was deep in conversation with one of the community workshop coordinators. Great Aunt May sat in a restored chair that had probably been original to the factory, looking like a queen surveying her kingdom, and Victoria was standing in front of a wall display that showed photographs from the factory's history. Her grandmother's face smiled out from a picture taken 40 years ago, surrounded by the women she'd employed. Victoria reached out to touch the frame briefly, then turned away. But Maya had seen her sister's expression, had seen the tears Victoria didn't let fall. Maybe that was the real victory, Maya thought. Not that she'd proven Victoria wrong, but that she'd proven there were other ways to measure success. Ways that didn't require someone else to fail for you to win. What are you thinking? Ethan asked. That my grandmother was smarter than all of us. Maya turned back to look at him. She knew exactly what she was doing when she split that inheritance 4 ways. She was teaching us. What did you learn? Maya considered that, looking out over the space they'd created together. That legacy isn't about accumulation. It's about continuation. About taking what you've been given and transforming it into something that serves more than just yourself. Ethan's arms tightened around her. Your grandmother would be proud. I think she knew I'd figure it out eventually. She just left me the tools to do it. Maya felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. Clean tears. She left me this building. And she left me the knowledge that women's work, my work, matters. That creating beauty and meaning and opportunity isn't a lesser form of success. It's the highest form. Below them, Sophie appeared, looking up at the mezzanine with an expression that said she was absolutely going to tease Maya about public displays of affection later. She made an exaggerated gesture at her wrist. Time for final speeches, apparently, duty calls, Ethan said, unfortunately. Maya straightened, trying to fix her hair with limited success. How do I look? Like someone who just got thoroughly kissed in her grandmother's factory. His smile was unrepentant. Like someone who built an empire on her own terms. Like someone I'm completely in love with. Maya's breath caught. You keep saying things like that. I keep meaning them. They made their way back down to the factory floor, hand in hand. The crowd had gathered near the main display area, waiting for final remarks. Maya took her position beside Great Aunt May, feeling the weight of her grandmother's dress and her grandmother's legacy and her own hard-won success all mixing together. She spoke about vision and community. About the importance of ethical business practices and sustainable fashion. About how the Morrison Street Creative Complex represented what was possible when you built for purpose rather than just profit. The words came easily because they were true, because she'd lived them every day for 6 months, because she'd proven them not just to her family but to herself. When the crowd finally began to disperse, when the last guests had filtered out and the caterers had packed up and the lights had dimmed, Maya found herself alone in the space with Ethan. The factory felt different, empty, more intimate, more hers. Their footsteps echoed on the restored floors as they walked through the studios and workshops, checking that everything was secured. So, Ethan said. That teasing note in his voice that meant trouble. About those partnership expansion opportunities we were going to discuss, Maya turned to face him, backing up until she was pressed against one of the restored brick walls. I'm listening, well. He moved closer, caging her in with his arms. I was thinking we could expand the business model. Maybe open additional locations in other cities. Sounds promising. Maya's hands found his lapels, pulling him incrementally closer. What else? We could also expand the personal partnership. His voice had gone rough. Maybe make it official. Maya's heart stuttered. Official? I'm not proposing. Not yet. Ethan's forehead rested against hers. But I'm thinking about it. Constantly. Inappropriately. In the middle of business meetings and conference calls, and every time you do that thing where you bite your lip when you're designing. That's very unprofessional, Mr. Cross, extremely unprofessional, Ms. Chen. He kissed her softly. But I'm not sorry. Maya kissed him back, deeper, letting herself fall into the moment. This building, this man, this life she'd built on her own terms, it all felt impossibly right. 6 months ago, she'd stood in her grandmother's factory and felt like a failure. Now she stood here and felt like she was finally, completely home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan's smile was devastating. Take me upstairs. Show me your studio. I want to see where the magic happens. Smooth, I thought so. They made their way up to the mezzanine level where Maya's personal design studio was tucked away, a space she hadn't shown anyone yet, not even Sophie. It was smaller than the main floor studio, more intimate. Her grandmother's original sewing machine sat in the corner, restored and functional. Her molecular fabric assembler hummed softly on the work table. And everywhere, sketches and samples and half-finished dreams. Ethan moved through the space carefully, touching things gently, looking at her work with the same intensity he'd shown that first night on the country club terrace. When he turned back to her, his expression was open, vulnerable. This is you, he said simply. Not the public persona or the business brand. This is Maya Chen, unfiltered, yeah. Maya leaned against her work table. I don't usually let people in here, I'm honored. He crossed to her, his hands finding her hips. And I promise to prove I'm worth the trust, you already have. Maya wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady presence that had become necessary to her happiness. Every day for 6 months, you've proven it. They kissed again, slow and sweet and full of promise. Outside the windows, the city glowed with its usual frantic energy. But in here, in this space Maya had claimed for herself, everything was quiet and certain and exactly right. Later, much later, they sat on the floor of the studio eating takeout because neither of them wanted to leave yet. Ethan's jacket was draped over her shoulders. Her shoes were kicked off in the corner. The molecular fabric assembler hummed its familiar lullaby. Question, Ethan said around a mouthful of noodles. Answer, what's next? You've conquered the fashion world, transformed your grandmother's legacy, proved your family wrong, and somehow still found time to date me. What's the next impossible goal? Maya considered that. 6 months ago, her goals had been about proving herself. About showing everyone she was enough. Now, sitting in her grandmother's factory with the man she loved, those goals felt small. Limiting. I want to scale it, she said finally. Not just the business, the model. I want to prove that you can build an empire on ethics. That sustainable, community-focused business isn't just possible, it's more profitable in the ways that actually matter. She paused. And I want to teach other designers how to do it. So they don't have to choose between their values and their success. Ethan's smile was proud. That's ambitious, I learned from the best. Maya gestured around the factory. My grandmother built something impossible. I'm just continuing her work. You're creating your own legacy, maybe. Maya leaned against him, feeling content in a way she'd never quite experienced before. Or maybe I'm just finally understanding what legacy really means. It's not about what you accumulate. It's about what you leave behind that makes the next generation's impossible dreams possible. Ethan kissed the top of her head. Your grandmother definitely knew what she was doing when she left you that building, yeah. Maya felt tears threaten again, but good ones. Clean ones. Yeah, she did. They sat in comfortable silence, eating their takeout and watching the city lights through the factory windows. Tomorrow, Maya would wake up to a flood of press coverage and business opportunities and 1,000 new challenges. But tonight, she was exactly where she needed to be, in the space her grandmother had built, with the man she loved, building a future that honored the past while creating something entirely new. Her wrist display chimed softly. A message from her mother: lunch next week? I'd like to hear more about your next projects. I'm listening now. Really listening, Maya smiled and sent back a simple, I'd like that. 6 months ago, that message would have felt like victory. Now it just felt like possibility. Like the beginning of something better than revenge or validation. It felt like family, messy and complicated and worth the work of building. Ethan's arms tightened around her. Happy? Maya thought about that. About everything she'd built and everything she'd learned and everything still to come. About her grandmother's legacy living on in every workshop space and every sustainable design and every young artist who would walk through these doors. About the fact that success didn't have to mean compromising your values or becoming someone you weren't. About finding love and partnership and purpose all tangled together in ways that made them stronger rather than weaker. Yeah, she said finally, turning to kiss him properly. Yeah, I really am. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos. But inside the Morrison Street Creative Complex, in the space where generations of women had worked and created and survived, Maya Chin felt completely, powerfully, authentically at peace. She'd built her empire. Not on her family's terms or society's metrics or anyone's expectations but her own. And it turned out that empire looked like community, felt like purpose, and measured success in the lives touched rather than dollars accumulated. Her grandmother would have been proud. But more importantly, Maya was proud of herself. And that, she realized, was the real victory all along.